welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. It's Wednesday. It's 4 p.m. Pacific. Let's do some Starfinder Wednesday today. We're going to do some lore. We're going to do a deep dive. We're going to jump in to the Stewards of Starfinder, the law-keeping entity that tours around the galaxy. And to learn more about this, we've got the one and the only, the incomparable Jason Keeley in the house today.
Hey, don't you dare compare me to anything.
I would never think about it. Don't you worry about that. So yeah, it's Dawn of Flame. That was a pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the first time a lot of us have seen it.
I've only heard the rumblings of it. About it.
Yeah, and Lori, sorry. I guess if you come in the middle of that video expecting this windbag to be talking to you, it is probably a little bit different. So yeah, let's talk about the Stewards.
The Stewards.
So first off, who are the Stewards? What's their main role? What do people know them from?
Well, the Stewards are a sort of Pact Worlds peacekeeping entity. We've never mentioned the core rulebook. We've sort of mentioned them in passing a bit in some of our APs and some of our adventures. But they date back to the Pathfinder times. They actually existed back in when Verces, not on Galarian, never on Galarian, but when Verces was back in Pathfinder time, the Ring of Nations, when they got together and became a sort of a united front, this group was formed to sort of be a kind of a UN peacekeeping force, essentially, to keep threats from the outside away and then sort of make sure that all the nations could have gathered together, didn't do any infighting. And that's basically the same purpose they serve in the Pact Worlds. When the Pact Worlds was created, when the Pact was signed by everybody, these Versites decided, oh, look, we're part of a bigger galaxy now. Let's basically pack up and move sort of towards Absalom Station and offer our services in that fashion. Some people weren't all on board with it, but eventually they became the Stewards that are in Starfinder.
Okay, so then essentially, they're like the UN, the peacekeepers, making sure things are going well. Do they? Can you call them? Like, is this like, hey, we need to get the Stewards in here to do this
basically
thing?
So the Stewards have kind of like an overarching broad purview, I would say. They protect the Pact World as a concept and the system as a whole. They leave the individual law enforcement to the planets, whatever, police force or what have you. Although they might have forts here and there. And they have a big navy that patrols, sort of keeping us safe from space pirates and outside threats. Not necessarily in a super military force. They are warrior diplomats.
Okay.
Let's say they like to solve things not by violence first. Try to talk it out. Like, for instance, if Eox is causing trouble for Akaton or something like that,
aren't they always?
They might be. The Stewards will step in and be like, all right, let's talk this out. Let's figure out what the problems are and try to get it solved. They're not beholden to the Pact Council in any way exactly, but they work with them and keep things peaceful.
Okay, so then what would would they cover like the Veskarium and like as far as their so hang on, let's step back.
Take a step back.
What do they consider their jurisdiction? Like, where is
their jurisdiction? Is the Pact Worlds.
Okay.
All the basically the whole system, keeping the protectorates protected, and keeping the planets not keeping them in line, not in a draconian sense, but just sort of making sure everyone is following the rules of the Pact and working together as a family.
Okay.
It's a big happy family.
So they're within the purview of what most of we would know of Starfinder.
Right,
so far.
the main crux of the setting. Okay. They don't have any jurisdiction in the Veskarium, but they have to have some sort of Veskarium counterpart that they probably talk to.
Okay.
Right, just in case there's some criminal, for instance, who flees the Pact Worlds to the Veskarium, they might, in terms of like, hey, Veskarium, you got a criminal coming your way. If you grab him and bring him back to us, we'll put him in jail. That kind of thing.
All right. So then, when you say they're like NATO and that sort of thing, like kind of peacekeeping, does that imply that they also have a sizable military to go along with that? Because peacekeeping only goes so far before you have to do something.
They have a navy.
Okay.
They have a big navy, which is called Overwatch. Sounds familiar, I know. But it is as a group, sort of lots of ships, lots of different ships, some big flagships and whatnot, and they do a lot of patrolling around the space. But they also have a lot of ground forces and agents in other places. And this wouldn't necessarily be considered like a military. I would consider this more like a law enforcement situation. A lot of sort of what you might know, the peacekeepers are sort of these special agent types who work with other groups, such as adventuring groups or other local law enforcement groups, or even bounty hunters who on a legal track. They'll work together with them and sort of like maybe even go undercover, or just sort of hunt someone down to the point where they might, those special agents are given leave to, if they need to go out of the system, they'll go out of the system. But it's generally try to keep it legal.
Okay. So then, along with that, they have to. Do they have standardized ships? Standardized types of ships.
Yeah,
so like that's a steward fleet. We can tell that from the beginning.
Their flagships probably all look pretty similar. We haven't illustrated any one of them yet, sadly. But I think what they would probably use for a lot of their navy are just sort of standard Pact Worlds style ships, so that they can, if need be, have an undercover cop car kind of situation and just be sort of flying by. So you don't go, no, the stewards, let's not do any crime. Right? So they just be, that's just some schmuck. Let's do some crime. And hello, it's the stewards.
So criminals regularly known for saying, "Hold up, let's not do any crime."
Let's do any crime. There are cops nearby, right? You wouldn't do that, right?
Crime off, everybody. Let's not do that right now. Wait a minute.
Keep all the crime to a low roar.
The car drives by. And
right.
Crime on, and
crime it up.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Jeez, it's the stewards. Exactly.
I mean, yeah, kind of, pretty much.
So I have some images here, and it's a building of some
right. It's the interior of a building. This is would be a scene from the interior of Peace Watch, which is the first steward headquarters located on Versi. So this building dates back centuries, millennia, and the exact reasons that stewards were formed, to sort of keep the Ring of Nations in line. But each of these, there's a couple of these forts essentially on Versis. Each one of them has an obelisk in the middle of it, or somewhere in it, that is marked with a different. Each one is marked with a different symbol that no one really understands. But also, each of them is marked with a plaque that reads, "From strength, unity. From unity, strength." Is that right? Thus do we stand against chaos. Thus do we honor their sacrifice. And no one kind of knows what that means. Thank you.
That was almost from memory.
That was almost from memory. I did have to look at my Post-it note over here.
In your defense, when we were doing the sound test, you did it from memory.
I did. I just decided to say it out loud here at the stream an hour ago.
You're just building tension by maybe I'm going to forget it, maybe I won't.
So that is almost like the steward's motto, although it's not quite a motto. It is more of almost like a memorial. It seems like, so no one really knows who the sacrifices are in that sense. But people posit that there's probably been back in probably before the gap even, there was some sort of war that they or a battle that the stewards would fought and lost some people during.
Okay.
So
I want to first of all, Brendan, thank you for the bits. It's super nice. Thank you for gifting. Was it the Real POTUS gifted a sub to Ms. Roy? Welcome. Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate that. So if the stewards are kind of like the FBI or something,
right? They might have
do some
stuff like that.
Peacekeeping missions. They do some investigative work.
Yeah.
So then, is there the potential? Because the first thing I think of is it's space. It's the FBI. I want some X-Files stuff going on. The potential has to be there.
The potential is definitely there. And one of the big threats that we sort of mentioned in the core rulebook is known as the unseen. They're the Greys, the Reptoids, all those sort of fancy, all those old school conspiracy theory groups. And most likely there's probably at least one or two special agents like this fine woman here has might be on the lookout for. Keep an eye out, because they constitute a threat to the Pact Worlds with their spooky goings on.
Right. And so what would be the difference between, say, any of the other law-abiding peacekeeping places that are, or companies that we've already talked about on some of the other shows, where does the stewards come in, and when it's like, no, that's not ours, you got to go talk to X, Y, and Z?
Well, it's kind of like the difference between state and federal government.
Okay.
I would imagine, right? All the planets have their own, probably most likely have their own worldwide law enforcement. Although some planets might have several of those, like maybe Triaxis probably has 2 or 3 because of they're sort of split into different continents, right? But and some might not have any. The diaspora, for instance, doesn't have any law enforcement in it necessarily whatsoever. Those are the planets. Any sovereign territory is the purview of the locals. Then the stewards abide by they abide by that. They will come in and help out. They will come in and be like, we need there's someone dangerous that we'll let you know. Someone dangerous on your planet that we tracked here or whatever. So that's different than what we might know from TV shows and movies where the FBI comes in and is like, well, it's our case now. I don't think the stewards would ever do that. They would come in and be like, look, you're in charge here, but you have our expertise. And I imagine most law enforcement agencies take them up on that because they're highly trained and highly skilled individuals.
Okay. So then getting into more of what they might actually do.
Yeah.
On the forums, we got a question about do they have like a special task force that is only to deal with space pirates?
They're on the lookout for space pirates, and I don't know if there's necessarily like a just a task force for that. It's just there's probably the Overwatch. There's probably some Overwatch ships assigned to the diaspora to watch out for too much space pirating. There might even be a free, an ops agent that is infiltrated the free captains and is pretending to be a space pirate just to get, just so that I imagine all that stuff, all that good law enforcement stories, FBI and undercover stories. That using the stewards is a great way to tell those types of stories.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then I think. Going back to first of all, some of the images got really small. I think I might have grabbed not the high res version, so that so it's mostly those two. It's the
two big ones, the two biggest images. Yeah, up the smallest.
I think I might have grabbed the wrong ones. So is it fair to say? So Kimlek is saying they're kind of like Interpol.
A little bit like Interpol, yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And they also have very much a diplomatic purview in keeping things peaceful, right? They're not necessarily just cops. They are ambassadors as well. Or at least work with diplomacy to keep the ambassadors from the Pact, representatives of the Pact Council or ambassadors to different planets, keeping them safe and making sure that no one is doing anything underhanded.
Okay, so then if there's room, as if you're playing a steward, right, as your character, there's infiltration that you can do. You can disguise and all of that sort of thing. Yeah. I'm wondering, just trying to put on the GM cap and like the creator cap. If you were playing as a steward, what are some of the fun things that you would try to get into, and some tips and tricks if you're playing as a steward? Right. That would be available to you. What kind of things would you suggest people are trying to explore?
Well, if you basically want to play kind of like a law enforcement type character, steward might be a way to go. You can go speak with the GM and be like, okay, my character wants to be a steward, and we have a lot of we have now printed like 3 steward archetypes that you can take eventually. But for the most part, and you want to talk with your GM and be like, okay, as a PC, you're going to be working with other PCs who could be any number of things, and whatever the campaign ends up being. You could, if you wanted to, do an all-steward campaign, if that's what you wanted to do. Right. And they would basically like essentially a small task force assigned to a specific problem for the GM. But if you're just playing an individual steward, like a steward officer here, who was probably assigned by one of their higher-ups to figure something out, whether or not that is, whatever the plot of your campaign ends up being, you can tie that into, as long as it's a threat to the Pact Worlds or, something like that, you could definitely have a steward on any group, and that person might not want to tell everyone that they're a steward. Maybe they want to keep it a secret. Just to be like until that moment when they bust down the door and throw out the badge. Steward on the ground. You're under arrest.
Freeze, punk.
Freeze, punks.
Yeah. And if you were a GM and somebody wanted to remain anonymous. They didn't want people to know they were a steward.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you would need to keep in mind if you're running a game like that, that would be helpful to know beforehand?
In general, the stewards don't have like a real rigid hierarchy, and that they're like, if your PC is playing steward, they don't have to report in every week or whatever like that. They're sort of like given autonomy by those in charge to sort of get things done. So as a GM, you wouldn't have to necessarily worry about making those. When an undercover cop's got to meet with his lieutenant or sergeant or something like that, and they've got to like get in a car and drive far away, and then like, oh, now take me in and pretend to beat me up. You wouldn't have to really worry about that kind of stuff. I think you would have to probably consider things like whatever the rest of the group is doing. Are they regularly breaking the law? The steward character is probably not going to be down for that, and you might want to have to figure out a way to mesh those two. But for the most part, they're basically given that autonomy, as I said, to get it done. So they can do whatever adventurers need to do, basically.
Right. And then another question. A lot of these are just questions I'm taking from the message board.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Which it lives on our Paizo.com forums.
Let me get that.
Was there a...
There was a thing there. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Brendan's giving gifts out. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Cool. Thank you so much, Brendan. That's nice. So as far as having the steward fleet, the fleet of ships and stuff like that, can we expect to see some stat blocks coming out for that? And
we don't have anything planned for the moment, but if it, when we need it, we'll probably throw some stats out for that. They have big flagships like any Navy should have, so there would be big, massive things that probably have the steward symbol emblazoned on the side or something like that, so but I think a lot of their smaller vehicles can just kind of look like anything, really.
Because, again, undercover.
They might be undercover, exactly, right. Yeah.
And then if we go back, is this the right show to maybe go back and talk about their formation on Versus, or is it like, is that a Pathfinder show?
I don't know. It's in the book Distant Worlds, which is sort of technically Pathfinder, but I don't know how quickly we're going to be getting into space with the introduction of the new edition, and sort of continuing to focus on the Galarian part of Pathfinder, and exploring, because again, we haven't explored all of that one planet really. That's in a lot of ways. I wouldn't. I mean, it's not much to it because it is sort of lost in the mists of history for the most part. It is just sort of like they did it. They got together. They became the UN, NATO. Things were cool.
And then they're done. And now they're just patrolling.
And now they're just now in space. Exactly.
Okay.
I imagine you'll see a lot of our art having this sort of iconic blue and gold armor. And as I said, we're talking a lot about going undercover. But I could also see that a character might want to wear that iconic armor for the impact of it. And if you've got whatever your armor is, you can say it looks like this sort of thing, because it's very there's a very good like silhouette with it and all that. This color scheme that you might now this group means business. They're working for the law. So when you're walking into that that seedy space cantina, people are going to know you're a steward, and maybe you can put some pressure on them, or they'll just respect you because they respect the law. Likely, sure. But so it's not necessarily all about being undercover as a steward.
Right.
You can just go in and be.
There's a lot of other facets to being a steward.
Yes.
All right, and then as a group, how dogmatic are they as a group? They have like as a steward, this is the god that we favor. Do they all get their own beliefs?
Yeah, I think you pretty much have your own beliefs. They are a law-abiding group, right? So most likely, a lot of them probably worship a lawful god if they have faith. But there's no like steward god.
Right. Okay. All right. That makes sense then.
Yeah.
Because again, it's like a government body.
It's like a government body. Not that Starfinder necessarily separates church and state in a lot of places, but stewards for one are beholden to the pact, right?
Right.
That agreement between the worlds of the system, that's there, And when you go talk to maybe like a real hardliner steward, and be like, "That's my god. The law is my god." Right. So you worship Abadar? No, the law.
the law. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, they're dedicated to being law enforcement.
Right, because it takes a lot to become a steward. It's high training, basically a long extended period of that, and it's no shame to wash out of that program. And that might be a good character background, is that you went to train for the stewards but just couldn't make the cut for whatever reason, because you buck authority too much or something. You're that loose cannon. And just have that sort of like, I'm basically trained physically and mentally, but for the most part I'm not a steward. I'm not actually a steward. I never graduated.
So then, and that actually kind of brings up a point that Dark Galaxies Gaming is asking in the chat right now, which is if there was a rogue steward, kind of like that washout, you're too much of a renegade, I want your badge and gun on my desk,
exactly.
blah, blah, blah. If they went rogue and they took off, would that be something that they would hunt them down? Like they would have to hunt them down?
But they went fully rogue and started doing crimes. Right. Definitely. When your former FBI agent starts planting bombs, the FBI gets very interested in that. But if you leave the stewards, if you never, or if you retire, quote unquote, or never make it through, that's and are a normal citizen, they're not going to hunt you down.
Okay. All right.
There's no secrets in the stewards that you can never leave.
That's the big one.
Yeah.
You can leave.
You can leave. You can leave. And look, it's not. Or I've seen a year or two of really heavy, not sure combat, but a cop's life can be hard or something like that. If you see I've seen a lot of junk. To keep it PG, and
I get you.
And you just were like, I gotta retire, even though I'm young, right? I've just seen too much, and I just need to live a normal life. And then you go adventuring, of course, because otherwise.
Well, then what do you do?
What kind of character is that? That's a fine NPC, maybe.
That's the beginning of a story.
Yes, exactly.
You gotta leave and then do something else.
Yeah.
And then just like again, if we're making the comparison to the FBI, there could be someone that was a steward, has retired, but it's like we need to get him out of retirement and
that kind of thing,
get him back on the force, or
exactly
the force, I guess.
Maybe
we call it.
I don't know what they call that. If they have a name for it, back in
let us
the force.
Know,
I like it.
Let us know in the comments or the chat. Are they called the force? What are they called? The
program.
The program. That's a good one with a capital P.
Yeah.
Program. All right. Well, cool. Well, we're just about out of time for the first part of the show.
All right.
So let's do this. I'm going to do a wrap up.
Sure.
And then we'll talk to the lovelies out in the chat land out there, and we'll get some more Q&A going. Because there's already been some good questions that have been flying by. So we'll get back to those. Anything else?
No.
Ready for some Q&A?
I'm ready for some Q&A. Get that sweet Dawn of Flames adventures coming out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right. And also, really quick, this won't matter. Never mind. We'll get to this in the Q&A part. All right. Let me do a goodbye. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. I hope you learned a lot. I know I did. If you've got some fun stories of having the stewards in your game, put it down in the comments down below, and I'll make sure Jason sees the best one. We'll laugh and we'll high five over your fun stories. And thank you so much for joining us. And if you would like to be a part of the Q&A that we're getting ready to start right now, join us on twitch.tv/officialpaizo, and you can be a part of the fun. And in the meantime, for Paizo and for Jason over here, and for me, I'm your old buddy Dan. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you again next time. Bye.
Bye.